Hello, how the tech are you? I think I finally got the inflection down on that one. I got to do it fast, quick, just get it out. That works. Anyways, this is our weekly tech show on Echoplex Media. Mostly weekly. We miss them every once in a while, but it's supposed to be weekly. We'll have some more on that later. But I am historian Matt, and I like to go over some tech news and science news and stuff like that. We do a lot of news stuff, but also just stuff we feel like talking about. And I do have a little bit of that myself. But for my topics today, I will be covering a monkeypox update. There's some big news recently, and I wanted to go over that again. So that's our continuing coverage of monkeypox. And then secondly, Google to reinstate Play Store app permission list, and why that's important, what happened, and all that good stuff I'll cover. And then finally, the United States Postal Service to buy a lot of battery electric vehicles. And I'll cover what's going on with that and why that is important. And the guy with the pink mic that hasn't been here for a while.
How's it going? I am HK Perrin, and yeah, I haven't been here in like over a month. I had jury duty. I was a juror on a murder trial, so it took a long time, and I wasn't really up for doing the show after that. Each day after that, that was like essentially a full-time job, and it was pretty intense. So I'm back now. My trial's over. Unfortunately, we were not able to come to a unanimous verdict. So it was a hung jury, and it's going to be retried. But I do feel like it was still important for me to do it. I feel that jury duty is your civic duty, so it's important to me. But anyway, as for today, I have a story about the Steam Deck. I'm going to talk about the history of the Steam Deck, and I'm going to talk about my experience with my own Steam Deck that I just got fairly recently, and then I'm going to talk about some predictions of how I think the Steam Deck is going to influence the future of PC gaming. Over to you, Dave.
I just have two stories. One is about a laptop, and the other is about myself. All right, Matt, take it away.
All right. So my first topic is monkeypox update. The big news is the World Health Organization declares monkeypox outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. That's apparently the highest level of alert that the World Health Organization puts out. So that is a little bit scary. It is, and their quote is, it's rapidly spreading through new modes of transmission about which we understand too little. They've put out new recommendations for, coordinating responses to stop the transmission, engaging affected communities, intensifying surveillance, improving infection control in hospitals and clinics, accelerating research into vaccines, and managing international travel. So that unfortunately means we're going to have some more restrictions coming on soon for monkeypox on top of the COVID-19 stuff. But so far, monkeypox is not that common yet, but we'll get into that. Two big cases of concern where we had the first two cases of monkeypox in children in the U.S. And there were a couple other cases in children in other places, including Europe. But on the U.S. one, or the U.S. cases, there was a toddler in California and an infant in D.C. Both of them are reported to be doing well, so that's good. But it's concerning that it's getting into children because monkeypox is very contagious. It's mostly not very dangerous, but in young children and older adults, it can be a problem. So getting into children is a big concern. The U.S. has the largest case count of any country in the world after Spain. So we're second largest in the world. The global cases are over 16,000 right now in 71 member states of the WHO, of the World Health Organization. Europe remains the center, but obviously it is spreading in the U.S. And there have been 5 reported deaths globally. So again, it's not very deadly. Can be pretty hard to get through, even though it's not deadly. It can be a pretty bad infection. But yeah, that's where we're at. But generally, it's thought to be spread through respiratory droplets. So it is airborne, but it's not as transmissible as COVID-19. And to get it through the air, you have to be in close contact, like sexual contact. And apparently, I don't have this written down, but it can also be spread by touch if you have contact with somebody, physical contact with somebody who has monkeypox, particularly around where they have the little sores that pop up, the pox marks, so to speak. That's what I got for an update. Do we have any questions? I blew right through that.
No real questions, except there's like a moral panic going around about it, because of course there is, and it's targeting people like me again, as usual.
Yep. I was trying to avoid that, bringing that up, because there is no reason. Like, it's not specific to any group of people in that respect.
Oh, we're used to it. The gays, we're used to just being everybody just assuming we're spreading diseases to everybody. We do this every fucking I just swore on this show. Bad Dave. We do this every 20 years or something about something else. It's the gays giving you the disease.
Yeah. Actually, with at least one of the children that got it in the U.S., because it's been linked to basically the gays so much, they were very concerned about how the children got it, and there was some research into and questioning of the kids, but that did not seem to be a problem at all. One of them, they just have no idea. The other one, they were in a household where the people in the household had monkeypox, so it just spread to them, and that's how they got it. So that's what's going on there. Moving on. Real quick hit, but I thought this was kind of funny, and my old employer, Google to reinstate the Play Store app permissions list. Basically, the Play Store apps permission list was replaced recently by the data safety screen. And the data safety screen apparently would pop up when you're installing an app. The screen lets developers list what apps, what data the app actually collects that you're installing. The problem was this was all on the Honor system, so the developers would be the ones that have to explain what's going on. The Play Store app permission list that existed previously that they shut down for a little while was a generated list that came from requests from the app and doesn't actually require you to trust the developers. It was automatically generated and you couldn't really get around it. So people are really concerned that the data safety screen was pretty much on the Honor system, and we know how honorable app makers are. And there was a public outcry, and the Play Store app permission screen is coming back. I believe it's not back yet, but it will be soon. Any questions or comments? I feel like this is a good one to comment on.
Yeah, to me, it seems like the data safety screen was just useless.
It seems so. You're like, oh, I'm going to trust you. Is that right? I just believe what you tell me instead of, because the operating system can tell you what it's asking for.
Yeah,
exactly. The operating system knows what it's asking for, and the App Store knows what it's asking for. So it's much better for either the operating system to give you this information or the App Store to give you this information. Otherwise, unscrupulous developers like HK over here could just lie to you about how much of your data they're stealing.
The data safety screen, I mean, why not just call it like a privacy policy? Because that's what it is. It's a policy. It's not like... It doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, some people said that
violate their privacy policies all the time.
The advantage to the data safety screen is developers could explain why they're collecting the data, while the permission list would just say what data they're collecting without information.
That's what a privacy policy is for, though.
Yeah, true. People were saying, they could have been like combined where it would show the list and the developers could go in and explain why for each bit of data they're collecting, why they actually needed to collect it. That is not
So-
happening.
That is something that I like about Apple, about the way Apple apps have permissions, is when you ask for a permission in an Apple app, you also give a description, a mandatory description of what you're trying to do. And according to their guidelines, it can't be something like, we need your location. It's got to be an actual reason that you're requesting location permission. So that, that exists in both iOS apps and Android apps. Those permissions exist in like a manifest that exists in the distribution file of that app. So they know what everyone's asking for, what all the apps are asking for. But with iOS, you actually get a description of why it's asking for that on the pop-up.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good way to deal with it. All right, I'm losing my mouse here. Moving on to my last topic. The United States Postal Service to buy lots of battery electric vehicles. So United States Postal Service, USPS, originally planned to buy about 165,000 next generation delivery vehicles. These are vehicles that will be built specifically for the USPS to drive around and deliver mail. That number has been reduced to about 50,000 due to budget constraints. But of that number, of the 50,000, nearly half will be BEVs, electric vehicles. The next generation delivery vehicles, or NGDV, is designed to be either an ICE or a BEV, so internal combustion engine or electric. Either way. So the problem was, after they first decided to make their order, the USPS was sued by 16 states and environmental groups over the initial order to basically tell them, hey, what's going on here with the diesel-powered NGDVs? The initial review by the USPS, the environmental review, basically they came to the conclusion to use more diesel vehicles than electric, with only a tiny 10% being electric. But the diesel powered NGDVs would have 8.6 miles per gallon with the air conditioning running, and 14.7 miles per gallon without the air conditioning running, which is in both cases is pretty low, and which is not too surprising because it actually has it's carrying packages and stuff. But if you can do electric vehicles, that's going to save a lot of pollution and greenhouse gases.
Money.
Unfortunately, well, let's see. Hold on. So after the initial 50,000 of these specific next generation delivery vehicles, the USPS is going to buy an additional 34,500 commercial off-the-shelf vehicles. So basically vehicles being built by other car companies that are just built for being delivery vehicles and such. But only if they basically fit the requirements of the USPS, and whether or not they'll be electric. They're not saying how many of those will be electric because they basically don't know, because it'll be based on availability. How many of those vehicles will be electric or available to be electric. Finally, the USPS will be keeping another 50,000 of their older LLV delivery vehicles, or basically the older mail delivery vehicles. Unfortunately, that's going to mean that they're going to have those older vehicles have higher operational risk, higher maintenance, and of course, higher pollution, including greenhouse gases, and will not be replaced for now. So that's a little concerning. It's going to keep greenhouse gases high, but hopefully when I hope that somehow they'll get more money to replace, hopefully their entire fleet, at least of the strictly, last mile mail delivery vehicles with electric vehicles. But we'll find out. But this is a step in the right direction. Any final comments?
It boggles my mind how they're like, oh, due to budget constraints, we need to instead buy vehicles that cost a whole lot more to run.
Yeah. Well, the problem is I think the electric vehicles are a lot more expensive to buy initially. And definitely now with gas
much
prices
cheaper to run.
so much higher. Yeah. Gas and maintenance are so much lower.
Like gas
Once
is
they
zero.
buy it, they're good.
I mean, so fuel, electricity, you'd spend like probably, I mean, I don't really know, but I'm assuming that they could get their electricity pretty cheap. So they'd probably be able to fill up a vehicle's battery for like a few dollars versus like $50 for diesel.
Yeah, I mean, I have an electric car. It's not a very small one. It's the Model Y, Tesla Model Y. And if I charge it at home, it costs me about $5 to charge. I'm guessing these delivery vehicles would have to have bigger batteries, probably like at least twice as big, right? And then certain states will have higher electricity costs, but seriously, it's way, way cheaper.
Yeah. And like you said, maintenance costs as well. There's like hardly any maintenance on an electric car.
That's true. It's pretty much
with the
rotating tires is the big one. What?
With a diesel powered car, you have oil changes, you have tune-ups, you have to replace a lot more mechanical parts more frequently.
Yep.
Mechanical parts that just don't even exist in an electric vehicle. Like there's no camshaft in an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it boggles my mind. It's like, who could possibly come up with that excuse that it has to do with the budget?
The money now. I mean, they have money. They have government agencies just allocated certain amounts of money to spend every year. They're probably allocated a certain amount of money to spend on replacing the vehicles, and they have a certain amount of money, and so they think they should buy some of the cheaper vehicles. But not for nothing, the new one looks rad. Like, I think it looks super cool. I just think it looks great.
If you showed the caption under the image, it actually says, this is not a rendering by Pixar. This is a real vehicle.
Yeah, it looks great. It looks cool.
Also, USPS is not an agency of the government. It is a company that is owned by the U.S. government. Which makes it's basically self-running. It has its own budget, although the U.S. government can get in and mess with it, and has in the past and caused a lot of problems. I would like to see the federal government just give them money to buy the new vehicles. I think, I mean, it'll be a little bit expensive, but not that bad.
Saves money in the long term.
But it would save money in the long term for a company that they own,
Yeah, it's fucking nuts to me that they don't do that.
Yeah. So I guess it's Hunter's turn.
All right. So I'm going to talk about the Steam Deck. I got my Steam Deck recently. I ordered it on July 16th, 2020. And I received it on July 2021. I received it on July 16th, 2022. So it was exactly 1 year after I put in my $5 registration that I actually received my Steam Deck. And if I can turn it on here and show you a little, this is what it looks like when it's running a game. See, there's my little cat. This is a game called Stray that just came out. And I played this whole game on the Steam Deck. And it was an exceptional experience. Although, let me wait to talk about my experience and give a little bit of a history of the Steam Deck. So the Steam Deck is actually, like, a lot of people think that it's a relatively new thing that Valve did, but they've been working on like the foundations of the Steam Deck for nearly a decade. Back when Windows 8 came out, which I believe was 2008. Am I correct? 2008? Something like that. Back when Windows 8 came out. Actually, it may have been later, like 2010. Anyway, Windows 8, if you'll recall, had something called the Windows Store, which has since been renamed to the Microsoft Store. And that is an app distribution platform that's managed by Microsoft. So Microsoft dictates what is allowed to be on that store. And one of the rules for your app being included on that store is your app can't be itself an app distribution platform. And that includes game distribution platforms, and Steam is a game distribution platform. So that was kind of a shot across the bow at Valve. And Microsoft has since released 2 separate versions of Windows, one still currently being released, where you can only install apps from that store. There was Windows RT, which it was understandable why you could only install apps because it ran on ARM processors and x86 apps wouldn't work on those. The other is Windows in S mode, which is currently still being offered, and there's no technical limitation why you wouldn't be able to install apps like from anywhere. So the fact that Microsoft is trying to push a version of Windows where you can only install Microsoft approved apps very much gave Valve some fright. So Valve back in 2015, November of 2015, released the Steam machine, something that they had been working on for a while. Valve didn't actually produce the hardware of the Steam machine. They produced SteamOS, and it was up to hardware manufacturers to produce hardware and distribute it with SteamOS bundled onto it. And SteamOS was just Linux with Steam running in an interface designed for use with controllers. So if you hadn't heard of SteamOS before, basically that's what it is. It's a custom version of Linux that runs Steam out of the box. SteamOS 1 was based on Debian 8, and SteamOS 2 was based on Debian 9. So both Debian distributions. And the cool thing about SteamOS was you could use it as just a regular desktop. Unlike, say, the PlayStation's operating system. You can't use the PlayStation's operating system as a regular desktop. You can't install like LibreOffice on it. So with SteamOS, you could actually use it as a computer. But it was a miserable failure, the Steam machines, for a number of reasons that I won't really go into here. One of the bigger reasons was that game studios weren't going to develop games for it because its market wasn't big. And its market wasn't big because no one was developing games for it. There were a few studios, like I know Feral Interactive ported Tomb Raider to it, which was a game that I think was 2 years old at that time, so it was a relatively new game, which that was a big deal, that they got Feral to port over Tomb Raider to Linux. It was seen as a huge win in the Linux community, but ultimately, Steam machines and SteamOS failed. So that brings us forward in time again to now August 2018, Valve releases Proton. Proton is a compatibility layer for running Windows applications and games on Linux. Proton is based on Wine, which is just for running apps on Windows. And it includes several things on top of Wine that let it run games that are designed for Windows on Linux. So Valve knew that they weren't going to get game studios to come over to Linux, so they need to make Linux work with what game studios were putting out. And that includes 2 compatibility layers that go inside of Proton. One is called DXVK, which translates Direct3D 9, 10, and 11, which are Microsoft's proprietary APIs, into Vulkan, which is an open API that exists on both Windows and Linux. And then there's also VKD3D, which is another project that translates Direct3D 12 into Vulkan. So with both of those projects inside of Proton, Proton can play any Direct3D game all the way back to Direct3D 9, which is like Windows XP era gaming, I believe. Which is great. That means there's this huge back catalog of games that should now be able to work on Linux. Now, at the time when Proton came out in 2018, it wasn't actually that great. You could run, I believe Valve released it and they had like a few dozen or a couple dozen games that officially could run. And ever since then, it's been getting better and better and better and adding more and more and more games. And recently it started getting to the point where games would come out and they would work day one. Like I remember it was a big deal that Cyberpunk 2077 worked day one on Proton. And this was before the Steam Deck was even announced. So it was a big deal in the Linux community, but no one else outside of the Linux community really cared. So all of this was building up to, like we didn't know it at the time, but all of this was building up to the Steam Deck. So when Valve announced the Steam Deck a little over a year ago, they also announced SteamOS 3, which is it is the new version of SteamOS, and it's based on Arch Linux with Steam and Proton on top of it. So it can run almost any Windows game. I think on Proton DB the official numbers are it can run like 80 to 85% of Windows games. And some games it can run just fine. There's no technical reason it can't run them. But the anti-cheat software doesn't work on Linux, and they'll kick you off if you try and use it on Linux. So for some of them, it's not a technical limitation. It's that the company bans Linux users, which sucks. So hopefully the popularity of the Steam Deck will change their minds. So something to note about SteamOS 3 when compared to SteamOS 2 is that it uses a read-only file system, which a lot of people thought was a bad idea, but I personally think that's a great idea because it means that every time Valve issues an update, they know exactly what is on the system partition of your Steam Deck or of whatever device you have that's running SteamOS. And they know once they update it exactly what it's going to look like after that. So they can offer certain guarantees. And this wouldn't have been possible back in 2015 when SteamOS 2 or I don't know when SteamOS 2 came out, but back in the old versions of SteamOS, that wouldn't have been possible. The reason that's possible today is because of systems like Flatpak. And Flatpak is what you use to install an app onto a Steam Deck that's not like delivered by Steam. So for example, I use an app called PolyMC to run Minecraft on the Steam Deck, and that's delivered through a Flatpak. So it's very nice to be able to install these apps through Flatpak and still not mess with the read-only file system. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Another thing they introduced is GameScope, which GameScope is GameScope creates a compositor that the game sees as the desktop that it's running in, and that lets you do certain things like system-wide FSR resolution scaling. FSR stands for Fidelity FX Super Resolution, and it's a way to upscale. It's a way to upscale anything, but usually a game, to a higher resolution and have it look much better than the older versions of upscaling, like linear upscaling or so GameScope lets you do that on a system level. So any game at all will work with FSR through GameScope. AMD recently released kind of the same thing called Radeon Super Resolution. So if you've heard of that, that's the same thing, but this is for like one game at a time versus your entire screen. Another thing is they switched to KDE Plasma, which personally I'm a GNOME user, but KDE Plasma, especially on the Steam Deck, looks phenomenal. It is so good. It is super user friendly. KDE is has been making a lot of pushes recently to make their experience better right out of the box. So, I've been using it and it's been wonderful. So that's kind of the history of the Steam Deck. That's where, the Steam Deck had a much longer history than people realize. So now I'm going to talk about my experience with the Steam Deck. When I first got it, I was pretty blown away. It feels exceptionally comfortable and very high quality. It definitely feels like a premium product. And it's much lighter than I thought it would be as well. And it is a very large device, but it's not uncomfortable to hold. It's actually very comfortable in my hands to hold it. I do have somewhat large hands, but I have friends that have it that have normal sized hands, and they like it as well. So I do think it's a good size. And in terms of ease of use, I would put it in between like a console and a PC. That might be confusing, so let me explain it. So like with a console, you buy a PS5 or an Xbox Series X or even a Nintendo Switch, and you just know that everything you buy is going to work with it immediately. You buy the game, you put it in, it works fine, perfect. With the Steam Deck, it kind of does have that experience with the verified games, but there are other games that are called playable. And when you're buying a game in Steam, you'll see that there's an indicator that shows whether it's verified, playable, unsupported, or unknown. And you can buy a playable game and play it on a Steam Deck, but you won't have the experience like the game is designed for the Steam Deck. It'll be sometimes just a little bit off. Even if it's something as small as like it shows you keyboard prompts instead of like the button prompts for the controller, or text is a little bit too small to read on the screen, on the Steam Deck screen. So it's if you're only playing verified games, it's like a console experience. It's great. If you're playing verified and playable games, it'll be in between a console experience and a PC experience. And if you're playing unknown games, then it could be anything. You're going into unknown territory at that point. But all in all, I would say everything that I have tried, or almost everything that I have tried on it, has worked flawlessly, and it's worked better than what I expected it to. There was one issue in one game that I had. It was Borderlands. The text was like very jumbled, and I found out I just had to go and change one setting. I had to force it to be like native resolution, and then it was fine. So other than that one thing, everything else has worked right out of the box. I didn't need to adjust anything. And I've played about 5 or 6 games on it, so it's been a very good experience. So I do want to talk about some predictions as well that I have for the Steam Deck. I believe that the Steam Deck is going to open up PC gaming, or I should say specifically SteamOS. I think that SteamOS is going to open up PC gaming to be an amalgamation of Windows and Linux. I think game studios are going to start targeting SteamOS, and I think within probably 2 or 3 years, it will be very unusual for a new game not to work in Linux. And I think the studios will make sure of that. Like it will be the studios that will make sure it works in Linux. And I do think that that will be mostly because of the Steam Deck itself. I don't think people are going to be installing SteamOS on their own PCs. But we could get to a point several years down the road where SteamOS has progressed to a point where people would install it on their PC, on like a gaming PC. And at that point, I think potentially you could see the year of the desktop Linux.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, so I don't think it will be anytime soon, but I do think that PC gaming in particular, you're going to see studios make sure that games work on Linux because of the Steam Deck. And also, like, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Steam Deck's getting a lot of publicity.
Yeah.
Because it's extremely popular. Like, a ton of people ordered it on day one, and they're still getting through those orders. And once they get to the point where, you know, they've gotten through all those orders and they're taking orders that ship within a week, I think we're going to see a lot more like people who are a lot more people who only know Windows are going to get this device that runs Linux, and they're going to have a great experience as their first Linux device, which is going to be really cool.
So one of the things I would predict is I think this is probably just the first device from Valve. I think they're probably going to put out a competitor to like a Xbox or a PlayStation next, where you're going to get this thing and hook it up to your TV, and it's going to be a little bit bigger and a little more powerful, but it'll be the same experience that you have on this Steam Deck. It'll just be a console that you plug into your TV, and I think that'll be a big hit too.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I also think that Valve, they have the Valve Index. They have a VR headset, but I think VR is moving towards being self-contained. And I think with this same technology, like the same kind of device, like a handheld like this, you could put this in a form factor that fit on your face, and Valve could make a self-contained Linux-powered VR headset.
This is all great because, as you said, the SteamOS, like third parties were making what they were calling them Steam boxes, and those devices were just not great, right? They were targeting the price point of a PS4 or a Xbox, but those devices are subsidized because those companies also make games, and they're going to make a bunch of money on the back end when you buy a bunch of games. And the Steam boxes didn't have that advantage, so you couldn't kind of loss leader it, and so they were weak. They were made of less good components or whatever. And I think the Steam Deck, they used good components in it because Steam is themselves, or because Valve themselves is going to make money on the back end on the games. They were able to loss leader the device a little bit. Which one did you get?
And they do lose money.
Which one did you get?
I got the base model, the $400 one with the 64 gigs internal, and it's because I put in a 1 terabyte SD card. So I knew the 64 gigs wouldn't be a problem for me. I already had the SD card. So I think another prediction that I'm going to make is I think we're going to start seeing a lot more devices running SteamOS out of the box. I think companies are going to start selling devices that come with SteamOS, and Valve is going to be super happy about that.
If those devices are good.
Valve doesn't make money when you buy a Steam Deck. If you were to only ever buy a Steam Deck from Valve and nothing else from them ever, they would lose money on you as a customer because they lose money when they sell you this. But if you were to buy... if you buy a Steam Deck, you're probably going to buy games on Steam. And like you said, it's a loss leader for them. But if you buy a device that Valve didn't even make, and that device pushes you to make Steam purchases, then it's just win-win for Valve.
Yeah, I've heard only good things about it. I know when it first came out, there were a couple problems that Valve fixed them real quick, and the problems were software, not hardware. And, when you were the first person to get any device, especially a device that relies on software, you just expect that. And I think that people who got it the very first round were kind of early adopter, kind of Linux tinkerer people who were like waiting, like on the, like at midnight or whatever to hit that button. So those people were going to be okay with a few kind of a little bit of a buggy experience or whatever. But yeah, everything I've heard about it, even from like non-gamers who bought it and then just went into the KDE mode and used it kind of as a carry around computer, they were quite happy with it in that mode too.
Yeah. Yeah, it actually does make a really nice computer. Like I've hooked it up with my little USB-C hub to this setup here, and it is a very nice computer to use. Like it's very quick and snappy, especially for something being that small.
Probably not going to edit video on it anytime soon, though.
You might be able to. I think it might have a hardware encoder.
Oh, but I mean,
I don't actually know.
But it's anybody with a regular, like a tower PC that's like fairly modern and built for gaming is going to have a better experience editing video on that.
Yeah, for sure.
But the thing's tiny, and the build quality everybody says is really good. Everybody's pretty impressed with it. That's good. I'm glad you like the device.
Yeah. One of the really nice things about it is it's got basically all of the components of a regular controller. So it's got, triggers, bumpers, front buttons, and D-pad, 2 joysticks, start and select. And then it's also got these, I don't know if you can see it on the video well, it's got these trackpads. It's got 2 trackpads, one on each side, and it's got 4 bumper buttons on the back. And with those extra buttons, you can do some really impressive things. And Steam has built this library called Steam Input that really lets you do some incredible things for games that weren't made for a controller. Like I can play Minecraft on this, even though Minecraft, the desktop Java version of Minecraft, was not made for a controller and does not have controller input natively. So with Steam's library, you can do things like have these like radial menus. So I just click this in like different sections of it, and that corresponds to like 1 on the keyboard, 2 on the keyboard, 3 on the keyboard, 4, 5, 6. So like you can really give a whole lot of shortcuts to different inputs, and that makes the Steam Deck much more useful for playing games that weren't designed for a controller.
Cool.
And if they don't put out their like a Steam controller 2, like the next version of the Steam controller that has all these buttons, I would be very surprised. Because the first Steam controller was fantastic, and I feel like if they made a follow-up to that has all of the same inputs as the Steam Deck, it's also going to be fantastic.
Great. Well, I'm glad you like it. I would order one, but I don't need one. I need a video card. But those are becoming more available. So I guess it's my turn now. Mine's going to be real quick. I didn't have much time this week for any of my shows. It's all of the stuff this week's going to be hacked together. But first, Dell put out the XPS 13 Plus Developer Edition, and they certified it for Ubuntu 22.04. You'll be able to order it from Dell with Ubuntu pre-installed. And if you already bought one with Windows, you'll be able to put 22.04 on it and get Dell's hardware optimized experience with a Dell optimized 5.17 kernel instead of the standard 5.15 kernel. And this marks 10 years of Dell certified Ubuntu machines, with the first Sputnik models dropping in 2012. We used to do this podcast or this show from a Sputnik Dell Precision workstation replacement laptop. So that's pretty cool. The computer looks like an XPS 13 always looks. It just looks like that. They just always look like that. I wouldn't, if I'm almost in the market for a new laptop, probably wouldn't buy it. I'd probably probably just get another Dell certified Latitude, but it looks nice. And for people who want something with a little more metal, kind of shiny, sort of MacBook competitor look. It's pretty good. Have either of you ever bought a Dell like Sputnik model or a Dell with pre-installed Ubuntu?
Not with pre-installed Ubuntu, but I bought one that there was a variant of it that came with Ubuntu. So I thought that everything would work on Ubuntu, but it turns out that the fingerprint reader that was built into the power button didn't work on Ubuntu. And the versions of that laptop that they shipped with Ubuntu still had the fingerprint reader in them. It just wasn't marketed and didn't work.
Well, that's a very minor inconvenience.
Yeah, it's just like it kind of annoyed me that Dell sourced this fingerprint reader from a company that is known to never work with Linux. Like the company's name is Goodix, and none of their fingerprint readers work with Linux.
I think I remember I had an XPS 13. It was a 13-inch XPS before they called it the XPS 13 that had a fingerprint reader, and I think I remember dealing with that like a very long time ago. It was Core 2 Duo days, and we could not get the fingerprint reader to work in Linux. My friend Brandon got all kind of crazy stuff working in Linux at that point. He was like, he had a laptop that everybody's like, oh, you can't get the camera working in Linux, and he got it working in Linux. He's like, give me that. Okay, and he just couldn't do it. He couldn't get the fingerprint reader working in Linux. So, yeah, that's great. I think I think sort of it goes, kind of all goes along with what you were talking about, HK, is that some of these, major companies, these, in Dell's case, they're possibly the largest manufacturer of PC in the world. I think when you include the enterprise, they certainly are, because they have EMC as well as their PowerEdge server line, and they've been supporting Ubuntu specifically for 10 years, and they've just been kind of doing it under the radar, kind of quietly. You can also get Dell servers with Ubuntu pre-installed. You've been able to do that for quite some time. And before that, you were only going to be able to find servers with RHEL pre-installed, and they were going to charge you for a license and stuff, and it was just a big mess. And then yeah, that's pretty great. And then I guess the next one's about me. I won't be on the show next week, but with any luck, the two of you will be able to do a show. I just won't have a backdrop or anything, but I can certainly turn on a computer and record you two doing the show. We're moving to a new studio. The community has already made us some purchases from our Amazon wish list. We've gotten stage lights. We have 4 of them now. We first got 2, and then we got 2 more. We got a stage light mixer so that we don't have to deal with, I don't know, pressing buttons on a light that's hanging from the rafters. We got some stands and some stands for tablets. We got wall mounts for a cell phone, because we're going to be using Video Ninja to provide a wide shot of the studio from a cell phone, which is going to be pretty cool, I think. Like as the show ends or whatever, if there's a bunch of people in the studio, you'll be able to watch everybody kind of get up and mill about, and as the show ends, instead of just a static image. And I'm going to be taking pictures of the teardown here as well as the build out there, and you'll be able to find those in a pinned post on my Twitter feed. You can find the link to my Twitter feed in the show notes. And also I'll be posting those in our Discord, and there'll be a link to our Discord in the show notes too. And I don't know, does anybody have any questions about any of this? Are you going to cover
your build out of the new studio on this show? The tech of it?
I mean, depends on how much time I have to edit something together and put it up on YouTube or whatever. But in real time, people will be able to follow it on Twitter at least.
Cool.
With some short videos and pictures, and I'm pretty excited because I don't know if you I think maybe HK's met Jeremiah, maybe Matt hasn't, but he's really handy. He's really handy, and he's going to have a lot of great ideas with how to use this space that I think maybe me and the Media Wench would not have, because he's built things all his life. So I'm excited to kind of see what his input on it is. And another thing, we're going to have D&D games on Saturday afternoons once we get going. So one of the people that lives there is big into D&D, and he's been doing it himself in his room. So we're going to set up a table with we have a GoPro. We'll have the GoPro pointed down at the table and move cameras around. We'll put a condenser mic somewhere so that people don't have to talk right into a mic. And that'll be on our Twitch channel, in theory. It'll take a while to get going, but I think our last show will probably be Wednesday night for Intellectual Dollar Tree, and our first show back will be the following Wednesday for Intellectual Dollar Tree. So
nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was it just so happened that the first falls like on the Monday, and we can move in over the weekend, and so it just so happens that that's gonna be the way. I'm going to order just a backdrop for myself for now until we figure something out. It's gonna be a piece of vinyl with our logo tiled on it, 6x6 piece of vinyl. Put it right behind me. And that's my backdrop until the Media Wench paints something real cool. So I'm pretty excited, although I'm not looking forward to a non-insulated garage in August in San Jose.
Yeah,
but we could maybe put
better
up
than
some
Florida.
insulation.
Just remember that.
You got to have a mini fridge right next to you full of ice cold drinks.
Or just to put my feet in. So, I mean, I guess that's the show. As we always do, we're going to make HK read the show out.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe and order a Steam Deck and ship me the box for the Steam Deck saying, hey, here's a gift for you. But then I open it up and instead of a Steam Deck, it's just bees. We do this show. We record this show. We put this show out every Wednesday sometime in the afternoon. And if you're tuning in at the time that we put it out, don't forget to check out the Intellectual Dollar Tree. That show comes on at 7 p.m. Pacific on twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. And follow us on Twitter at, is it EplexM?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
That was the best readout ever. Thank you.